Stress can make us feel very isolated. If perhaps we're not getting support from colleagues at work or from a partner at home, we can easily feel that we're carrying a load on our own, that we're somehow out on a limb. To a great extent, our ability to combat stress depends on the quality of the relationships we are able to build.
I think my relationships now are the most important part of life for me because it's the core of me, and it's the frame as well. It sounds very odd, but there in the middle is the utter sureness that whatever else happens, they're there, and I can rely on them, and they can rely on me. That nothing will change that.
My whole life I've been on the other side of the fence, an outsider, a loner, and that's the problem. If you grow up as I did without family, you can't. What to you and the rest of the world is normal, to me is different.
Knowing that you've got people there whose shoulders you can metaphorically lean upon is obviously enormously helpful.
Sharing our problems with others can give us the reassurance and confidence we need to help us deal with stress. If things get too much for us to cope with ourselves, there are always people we can turn to for support, whether it's our family, our friends, trained counsellors, or professional medical help. Sometimes, though, there may be deep-seated reasons, perhaps even going back to childhood, that cause us to feel more isolated than we really are, making it harder for us to relate to others.
I was born without the benefit of family or money or status or anything. I found myself in a home for waifs and strays in the East End of London in the 30s, in a slum. I was raised by an old lady called Martyn, who took in abandoned children, some of them literally left on her doorstep, wrapped in newspaper, one of them. That's why I became a newspaper man. And God help me, as I grew up, I realised I was totally alone in this world. I never had the pleasure of meeting my father. I discovered my mother when I was 7 or 8. One of the bigger girls, the older girls in the home, was obviously my mother. And I was raised by Mrs. Rayner. My whole life is not dominated by my childhood, but haunted by it. And I think everything I do has some kind of bearing on what it was like as a kid, my assessment of people. I mean, for instance, I can look at someone and in seconds weigh up their character on the basis of, are they going to be hostile or friendly? Cowboys or Indians, you can judge people very quickly. You become very perceptive, very aware, very streetwise, and very vulnerable. If anyone attacks me, people wonder why I get so upset when I'm monstered by the critics. And it's really going back to the childhood. When you're fighting for survival and someone is attacking you, you're even more in danger. The threat is greater. And you kick out, you lash out, you don't know what to do, you're frightened, you're lost. And those responses are still there when some toffee-nosed critic in the Daily Telegraph has a go at you nearly 60 years later.
Families can often provide the best kind of support a person can get. But with roles and expectations changing, the survival of the family unit is becoming an increasingly important issue.
I think the main issue for the 21st century and the balance of this century is the dual career family. How we're going to cope with men and women both working, pursuing careers and trying to raise kids as well. And I think this is fundamental to our whole well-being. It will be over the next decade and beyond that. So I think we have to really tackle this issue. And I think there are different ways of tackling it. Number one, we have the government way of tackling it. And I think government should be very sensitive to the child care needs of the dual career couple, because this is going to be very important and is increasingly very important. So we have to have government support for child care so that more women can go to work. Second thing, I think we have the organizational level. What organizations who we work for, how they should cope with this kind of issue. And for them, I think they have to have much more flexible working arrangements than they've had in the past. I mean, up to now, we've had kind of flexi time, between 8:30 and 9:30 and 4:30 and 5:30. Really flexible, really helps a dual career couple. Not at all. What we have to do is we have to have work environments where people can work partly from home, partly in a central work office, as long as they're given jobs to do and they're told, okay, your job is to achieve that objective, right? Where you do it And when you do it is your business. Just achieve the objective. If you have to do it partly from home, partly from the central office, just fine. So I think that's a very important thing. And I think the third most important way in which we're going to cope with the kind of dual career stresses is in the family. Because in my view, a lot of the stresses we're seeing now are because men aren't helping out. The new man, I mean, there's one of them, I think, in Aberdeen somewhere. But there is no such thing as the new man. That men are not really helping the dual career couple, and yet 2 out of 3 women are working. So I think renegotiating roles and renegotiating careers is going to be a future activity that's going to be absolutely vital if the family is to survive.
I always say that we should become our own best friend, but it's great to have a best friend out there as well as inside you. You know, someone who accepts you as you are, someone who says, well, that was bad luck, it wasn't your fault, you look great, or all of those things. And have somebody who is just there, not expecting you to do things for them, and somebody who likes you just because you exist.
I once read an advert which said, choose your parents carefully. It's an interesting idea, but not very helpful. However, unlike our blood relatives, we can choose our friends. When I watch my son playing here in the school playground, I hope that he'll make good choices in life, deep friendships. Because choosing the right kinds of friends is one of the secrets to surviving under stress. At the moment, it's all on and off, and fighting and then playing and laughing, birthday parties, then quarrels, and moving from one tiny clique to another. The right kinds of friends are those who encourage us and help to build up our self-esteem. Often our families are inadequate from that point of view. They may well be the source of a lot of our stress, but friends can give us back our sense of ourselves. Friendship is an art to be cultivated. It's something we can develop, but it's also a two-way thing. It's a giving as well as receiving, and we need to understand that if we're self-obsessed, then we'll always have very few friends.
I've got friends that I've known for, 30, 40 years and longer. They grow organically in a funny way. You grow you plant a seed, which is called an acquaintanceship. You meet someone, and you strike it well, in some respects. You find that you share a sense of humour, or you share an attitude or a belief, or you just like each other. And that's an acquaintanceship. And then over the years, the more you see of them, the more you talk, the more open, the more willing you are to share, and they are to share, you start to grow this great plaited knot, as it were, of solid relationship.
Because the quality of the relationships in our lives can determine how well we cope with stress, we need to make the most of those friendships that make us feel good about ourselves and help to boost our self-confidence. But even when we haven't got strong relationships around us, there's still a lot we can do to build our own resistance to stress.
There's a great deal of value, I think, when you're under stress, to talk it through with yourself. I mean, if you have nobody else you can talk to, then one of the good options is to just talk to yourself about it. For example, if I'm getting really uptight and late when I'm on the M25 trying to get into London for a meeting, I'll get really anxious and I'll rush between lanes and get my anxiety levels really up. And then what I do is I start having a conversation with myself. I said, if you keep behaving this way, Cary, you're going to get sick. If you get sick, you could even kill yourself, because this persistent, constant, aggressive, hard-driving behavior and adhering to time all the time is going to kill you ultimately. So what I do is I visualize in my head my children at home, my 7-year-old, my 9-year-old, and I have a conversation. I think to myself, look, for their sake, slow down. Don't do this to yourself. And that helps me, and I put the event into perspective. I think in life, having these kind of mental dialogues helps you put all sort of minor events into some kind of perspective and then behave in a much more appropriate way.
Good morning. 9 o'clock of a cold Monday morning, but for us, it is something special. It is the beginning of your training period for our trains. It is the beginning of our training period for the great and historic venture that is Perrins. In 3 months' time, we will open our doors, and casualties from our overcomplicated society will pour into Perrins, seeking help from our expert guidance and example. So I'm particularly pleased to see you all so punctual and keen this very first morning. Come on, 9... Where the hell are they all?
Talking ourselves through potentially difficult situations is a good way to boost our confidence. Assertiveness training groups like this one, run by Parent Link, can also help us to get the best out of ourselves and develop better relationships with those around us.
Any examples from you?
I can remember once at work, a colleague filled in my holiday list, and it was totally illegible, so that no one could work out how much holiday I'd had. And I felt really angry that she'd written on my holiday sheet. And, you know, initially I felt like attacking. But then I thought, well, perhaps we should try and work it out together. And I said to her, how can we solve this? And she said she wouldn't do it again. She wouldn't touch it again. And we still remained friends.
And that is being assertive. That's what being assertive is all about.
Any more examples?
Some people are naturally assertive because they've had all their needs met as a child. But if you've had the battle, or it could have been in school, where you had a teacher who labelled you as clumsy or stupid or dumb, and we go into a kind of trance. We actually believe these things that are said to us, the label given to us. And in doing that, we lose our confidence, our inner confidence. We may be great at our job, but we could be totally inadequate with dealing with other people. Assertive training empowers you to recognize your own needs, to state those needs clearly without blaming the other person. And in doing that, you have a happier lifestyle and you are capable of dealing with the stress in your life.
Before, I would have said I was a doormat. Literally, I could give a lot of advice to other people, telling them how they should do things, but never did it myself. Now, since I've been on the course, I'm actually putting it together, and I find it does work. And you can be quite calm, cheerful, even when, the walls are falling down around you.
Well, before, I would tended to have bottled up my feelings, not expressed how I felt, and probably not necessarily got what I wanted. I would have gone along with what else was going on. Whereas now, I would be able to express how I feel much clearer, and generally I'd get more of what I want, and other people would still remain friends with me.
Well, before I saw myself as the helper, the person who sorted things out, the person who people came to, and I tended to ignore my own needs and get in there and overwork myself, work myself out of frazzle. Now I can stand back and I can say, I'm sorry, I can't take that on. And I am now able to decide what is really mine and what is not mine. So I am much more objective. But for me, the greatest part of it is that it has helped me to find the child within me, the feelings part of me, and not just to be the cerebral animal that I used to be, very thinking and very objective. So in that respect, too, it has helped me to grow up, even at this age.
If we find that the stress in our lives is becoming overwhelming, or perhaps someone we're living with is suffering a great deal, both physically and mentally, then the most obvious thing to do is to go and talk to a doctor. Although many GPs themselves complain about being overloaded, they're becoming increasingly aware of stress-related problems and now recognize the need to do much more than just hand out tranquilizers.
A lot of general practitioners can talk and listen in a way that you may find extremely helpful. Not only that, they can refer you on to people who can help you to assess your life, to a clinical psychologist, for example, who can help you to assess the priorities in your life and to get rid of those things in your life which are causing unnecessary stresses. And most important of all, who can teach you how to relax, both physically and mentally. An absolutely vital way of dealing with stress if you're a tense person or the sort of person who finds it difficult to relax naturally.
When Marjorie McVeigh went to her GP for advice, he referred her to a form of specialist help known as cognitive therapy. It uses techniques which help patients to solve their own problems by learning to think about things in a different way.
It involves a weekly session with my therapist, Dr. Weiner. We will talk through whatever it is we've decided to put on the agenda. There may well be activities to carry out, diaries, techniques that help you to challenge the negative thoughts that you get. We'll analyse what we've discussed, decide on important bits that have come out of that analysis, and generally work through what those problems are until at the end of it you get to a point where you have a much clearer understanding of what's happening.
What thoughts would you have about it?
It's not particularly designed to make you particularly introspective. It's a practical help designed to make you look at what your problems are at the time and to help you systematically work through those problems, to give you a mechanism by which, if you feel anxious or your mood lowers, that you can use the same techniques, the same sequencing to look through any event, so that by the end of the sessions, by the end of the therapy, you are your own therapist, in a sense.
There's no special rule about when it's right to go for counselling, but I guess I'd say it's when you find yourself increasingly unable to cope with your own feelings and there's nobody amongst your friends and relatives and colleagues whom you can talk to. Probably because your friends, relatives and colleagues are part of the problem. So to get somebody who is right outside of that situation and who will be prepared just to sit and listen to you for a certain amount of time and perhaps offer some wise comments, that's what you need. Don't just let that situation go on and on where you feel worse and worse and more trapped, more and more alone.
Sometimes the help of professionals, or even the advice of family and friends, isn't the right kind of help we need to see our way clear of a particular situation. There are times when we need to distance ourselves from the things that are causing us stress and just find some peace and quiet to allow us to think our problems through carefully. After her husband left her, Isabel Lansdale found herself in a very emotional and agitated state. The idea that she might benefit from visiting the convent of the Sisters of St. Mary had not occurred to her.
A friend suggested I come here and try a silent retreat, which is like 2 days without speaking, apart from the person who's looking after you during that time. You have a sort of retreat conductor who you speak to. And so I came initially just to try and get some perspective on the problems that I had. And as you know, it's difficult to see something when you're in the middle of it. So just to get a long way away from it and just have some real silence.
Well, when people come in various forms of stress and difficulty in their lives, I think one thing we try to do is to provide an environment where they can stand back, have some quiet, and feel they're supported at the same time. So there's always a sister for them to talk to, if that's what they want. They don't have to have it, but that's made available if they want it. Somebody who can share with them and be there for them.
Well, the very first thing I say to them is get an early night. You know, have some sleep, because you first of all need to rest. And then if I'm actually sort of helping them in getting into prayer or meditation, I talk about physical stillness. Because if somebody's fidgeting and all over the place physically, they're not likely to get still inside. And sometimes it's argued, you know, that when you've got your inner stillness, then you can be outwardly still. But it also works the other way. But if they can't, then I say, well, go for a walk, go jogging. Sometimes you do exercise to get into stillness, just as you might listen to music to get into silence.
The sister that I saw when I first came here, and she was an ex-headmistress, and very she obviously thought I needed kind of keeping in line, and she was perfect for me because she didn't let me get away with any kind of rubbish. She forced me to be focused, and if she saw me kind of veering towards the common room to have a chat, she'd say, you know, aren't you going out on your walk now? You know, and I think that the common conception of the fact that sisters, nuns, are the people that run away from life into their little box, actually the reverse is true. That they, you know, if we have problems out in the world, we phone up a friend or put on the television, or we have a million ways of evading our problems. Whereas they, because, I mean, they have silence here, complete silence from 9:30 onwards. So if they hit an emotional problem, they tend to work through it rather than avoiding it. So any problems that I had are problems that they've experienced and found a way through. So they have an enormous wisdom.
Some people may be afraid to get help in the form of counselling for fear that it might somehow make them very inward-looking. But the whole purpose of anything we do to deal with stress, whether it's counselling, relaxation, or exercise, is not to turn us in on ourselves, but simply to find a way forward to lower our vulnerability to stress.
I think one of the kind of paradoxes we have in the whole field of stress is the fact that many of us who are doing research and doing interventions in this field are doing is making people aware of what their stresses are, what their behavior is like when they're under stress, what are the causes of it. This is a paradox because what we're doing is we're focusing in on the individual, and many individuals therefore become more self-obsessed with their own behavior. Is this stress behavior? Is he causing it? Is she causing it? What's causing it? And, you know, it becomes kind of an industry in and of itself. And really what we should be doing is making people aware of it, but saying to them, don't become self-obsessed. If you really want to cope well with it, gain control in your life, do things with other people, interact with other people, make your life not just internal, but external as well. Otherwise, we'll go down the American way. It's have a nice day business. It's all about, you know, stress is just another item to be packaged. And this is not really what it's about. It's about people's health, their well-being, their families. Their families.
During the making of this series, we've talked to a lot of people who've been under a great deal of stress. But time after time, I've been so impressed by the way people have found a way through. There's been courage, humour, and a readiness to accept changes too. Life can seem impossible, but the message of this series is that there's always hope. There's always something we can do. Dealing with stress is really about survival, finding hope, even in the most difficult circumstances.
And there he is. John McCarthy is home.
On the day that the hostage John McCarthy was released, it was good news for all of us. But can you imagine what it felt like for him? After being kept in darkness for 4 years, he talked about the joy of finally being able to look out of a window and see daylight. He had rediscovered the simple pleasure of being alive. It's a pleasure that most of us could benefit from rediscovering, and that is possible. Stress affects the quality of our lives, and if we take steps to deal with it, we can start to put things in perspective and learn how to really live again. The BBC book which accompanies this series is now available from bookshops. Written by Murray Watts and Professor Cary Cooper, it's called Relax, Dealing with Stress, and it costs £5.99.